All right, welcome to the PowerPoint on orientation and training. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you a resource. YouTube, as always, has some great resources, and I love them because they're totally free and available to you at your workplace or at home or even at school. So this is training techniques that work from a channel, Train Your Staff. And it's for managers and supervisors. This isn't specific to education. This really works in any workplace, but they do have some good ideas. YouTube is a great place for this. So I wanted to just link with the video. I'm not going to play it now, but just know that if this is an area that you're more interested in or knowing more about, please check out YouTube, and especially like Train Your Staff or any of the managing channels might be a great place. So today we're kind of extending the conversation about daily supervision or adult supervision because once again, as I've been kind of harping on all semester, we have the ultimate responsibility for how the teachers act in the classroom and how children are cared for within the classrooms. So this type of stuff is definitely important. And if I kind of had to talk about anything, this would probably be the class that I would love to teach, an entire class on this topic. This was my literal job when I worked for the Marine Corps. I was a training and curriculum specialist. I've talked about the really large centers that we had, but my job was to kind of onboard or orient staff because the teaching staff didn't have to have like the units because it's in a Marine Corps base. And our kind of important job was to train dependents. So men and women whose spouse was serving their country as Marines, Navy, Air Force, or Army. We have childcare centers to provide children for those Marines or sailors. And dependents typically are the staff who are teaching them. And so we needed to provide training for these staff that maybe had less skills and they hadn't taken their child development units either. So that was my job, was to basically in 40 hours have them prepared in order to go out into the classrooms. We also had a lot of mentoring going on, and we had a lot of additional education and professional development that was required within this job. And that's why I can kind of speak to this class. But I do really, really love this topic because I spent 5 years doing it, day in and day out, in addition to supporting curriculum, challenging behaviors, and special needs. That was also part of the job. But I just kind of came away with like training is key. And I know when I first started, I was definitely more about the policies than the people. So I would start off with like a memo or procedures, rules, something like that, write it out, give it to all the staff, and expect that a problem was handled. So let's say we were struggling with family style dining. Instead of going out and talking to 40 people, I was like, well, it's much more time efficient for me just to write a memo. If you read and do what I say on this memo, then we will have solved family style dining. But people are more important than policies, and they're much more bigger, and there's a lot more that goes into humans than just a policy. So how I tell and how I communicate the policy is the most important part of making sure that change is achieved. So I have to actually talk and train when I change a policy. We've been writing policies for this whole class, and I think that's deeply important. Before you go out and make a change, you need to have actually written it down. You need to have thought about it. It needs to make sense in your program. You need to have engaged in some kind of decision-making with your staff. So we're gonna make a change. If it involves classrooms, teachers, children, you've probably gotten the input or you've observed in classrooms to see if this would actually make sense. Once you've gotten to the point where you're actually writing a policy, you need to actually write it out. You need to be able to articulate it, to say it, to speak it, to live it. And by writing it sometimes and writing it clearly, that helps you understand and then be able to talk about it with other people. From there, then it also needs to, the policy is going to go into like a welcome book or an employee handbook. People are going to read it over and over, so it needs to be well written so people understand it. And then also the clearer it is, the better when you're actually training, you know the policy, you've written it, it's come from you, it's your words, you understand it, and you can tell people about it. So policies are important, but the training behind it and how you're going to tell people about it is the most important. So we're going to start with onboarding. It's also called orientation. I like the idea of onboarding too, because it's kind of the idea that we're welcoming you to a center. You're now on board with this team. You buy in, and you are going to be a staff member here. It's also, I think that it should be somewhat formal. And by formal, I don't mean that you're all wearing business suits and you're sitting in a meeting, that type of formal. I mean, you've actually kind of thought about it and you've put importance on the fact that you're training staff to perform work at your workplace. Early childhood education is a field in which there's a lot of skill. There's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of understanding, there's a lot of experience that goes into it, but a lot of it is skill. Diaper changing is a skill. Classroom management involves many skills. Talking with parents involves many skills. Handling children who are having temper tantrums or who are biting, those are all skills and multiple skills typically that go into it that you need to understand. So the skills that you might value might be different than another program. So the things that I'm looking for, the personalities that can engage in skills might be different than what somebody else is looking for too. So it does really start with hiring, make sure that you're hiring the right person for the job, and we'll go more into that. But also in onboarding, you're communicating your values and the skill set that you prioritize, and then how you want your program to be run. How are you going to use your personality and how are you going to use those skills in your classroom to provide great education for children? So typically there's also an onboarding or an orientation, and then there's probation as well. At the very, 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 very least, there is an employee manual, or you don't even have that, you're printing out procedures and policies. They need to read it. You need to make sure they're going to understand. So even if you have 15 minutes, there needs to be some kind of process of understanding that you need to make sure that your employee has. Like, probably a supervision would be the thing. Like if you're going into a classroom, how many kids can you legally, by licensing standards, supervise? But there's so much more skills that go into it. And then whatever you're having them read and understand, they also need to sign that they're going to understand, because that's going to come into termination, hiring, probation, plans of action, employee performance reviews, things like that. By signing, they say they are going to understand and they will do it. So especially with supervision, you need to make sure that they're going to understand it. And every single day, every day they come to work, they are supervising children the way that they are supposed to. When they're signing it, it's mostly kind of a legal understanding, so that if they come back and they didn't supervise, you can say, look, you signed this saying that you understand it. You're not doing it. And at that point, it's maybe a termination. Maybe it's a plan or performance action review. There's a lot of other things. Also, with onboarding, don't think that you're the only person who could do this. And I'm going to give examples later on, but a lot of times people think it's only me. And when I was first a training and curriculum specialist, I had 40 hours. I had to treat that was my full-time job. I didn't do it every week, but when I did, that week was devoted to those people. At the same time, I have, 35 other staff members that I have to be supervising, in addition to a director and assistant director, but I have other jobs as well. And also, you don't want to hear me talk for 40 hours. You don't want to have me put on videos for 40 hours. You don't want to have me show you lesson planning. Why don't you learn from somebody else? I had mentor teachers. I had a program lead. I had just great teachers who had bachelor's. Like, why am I not using them? Like, finally it clicked for me and my training got so much better. So it was a mix of me and the way that I can train, because I spent a lot of time being active and putting thought into how I train people. And then also in the classroom, learning from the children, learning from the staff, seeing the staff interact with the children. And then after that, there's typically a process or a system of formally or informally monitoring their progress in the first 3 months, and that's typically what probation is. If you're within a larger organization, HR typically determines the probation period and duration. If this is something that you want to do, you could do it with management and HR. If you don't have an HR, you could do it with other people within your management group as well. 2 months, 3 months in that process, you have 2 formal observations, daily check-ins, whatever it is. And then at the end of the 3 months, before maybe benefits kick in, you make the final determination if this person shows the skill set within 3 months that you are looking for in your classroom. So here's an example of onboarding. So this is 5 days, and it's just an example of something that I might do and what I did on Camp Pendleton, where once again, we're taking dependents who don't have because we don't have licensing, we don't have community care licensing on a Marine Corps base. We have the Department of Defense, which oversights us. So we're taking dependents, and in 5 days, we're teaching them the skill set in order to be caregivers or teachers. So in the first day, in the morning, it was welcome, making a really big deal about meeting them, taking them on a tour, introducing them to everybody, just making them feel welcome in my center. I did go over their personnel file, making sure that I have their fingerprinting, just that everything that I need from the file is squared away, so that legally they can start to work there as well. And then showing them the employee handbook, making sure that they have it, and just making sure that they kind of have a system, a macro level. So a big view of the center, where we work, what we do, or my philosophy, that type of stuff. In the afternoon, they're shadowing my float, or the person who goes around giving breaks, and they're meeting all of the staff again, and maybe the afternoon staff who they didn't meet in the morning, and just getting a sense of how the program runs, getting a sense to see when breaks happen, what kind of classrooms we have, how many children are in each group, that type of stuff. So the mix of me kind of welcoming them, and then them also getting some hands-on time in the class. On day 2 was a lot of health and safety, kind of the basics, the bottom level, health, safety, and supervision. Really, really important, and basics, that's where the building blocks. Like, what's the most important? You know how to supervise kids, and you know health, safety, and food handling. So we watched some videos on that. We practiced diaper changing, like literally I had a doll. We practiced diaper changing. We mixed bleach and water solutions. We looked at Real Simple. It was very hands-on, but they were also signing policies throughout this, either in the employee handbook or things that were in their personnel file as well. So making sure whatever they signed, they understood, and I could also check. So if we're talking about diaper changing, I can actually see that now they understand diaper changing, and if they sign a policy on diaper changing, they know what it means. In the afternoon, I have them, in this program, we were a large program, not everybody has this, but they shadowed a janitor and a cook. So they got to see what was actually happening in the classroom, and they also got to see what was happening with our maintenance man or janitor as well. Also reinforcing to them, these are your colleagues as well. Yes, you're a teacher, and yes, you're going to spend a lot of time in the classroom, but the janitor and the cook are support people to you, and you will treat them with respect because they have a very, very difficult job. And before I brought them into the classroom, I said, your job is hard. You have 12 3-year-olds, but the teacher, and then I would name them by name, have a harder job than you. They're providing 3 hot meals every day for the children in our program. You're not going to get in their way. You're not going to treat them with disrespect. They're vital to my program, and you're going to see how hard their job is today. After that, that was typically an hour, you know, just half an hour here, half an hour there, and then a specific teacher. So typically I might have an idea they're going to be in infant classroom, they're going to be in the toddler classroom, or maybe I just want them with my program lead or my, so either the classroom that they're going to go into, I think, or with a mentor who I think that they might really learn a lot from, but they're going to spend some more time in the classroom as well. On day 3, we take a little break, and in the morning I have them working with the children and performing I'm performing a hands-on observation as well. So I'm showing them what I want, or my mentor teacher is as well if I'm busy and need to go into a meeting, but they're actually working with the children. So they have a couple of days. We need to stop for a little bit and put this into practice. In the afternoon, I would have a treasure hunt. So I would typically ask them, they would need to find the allergy form in each sheet and have the teacher sign off that they had done it. They would need to find the first aid kit. They followed the evacuation route. So they would actually have keys and literally do evacuation routes from each classroom, especially for classrooms that are wonky and, you know, it's not just walk outside. If they have to go down a hallway, something like that, they would practice part of it. So there was a treasure hunt as well to help them with evacuation routes, fire routes, allergies, special needs education, evaluation, where the printer is, how do you make copies? So there was a pretty long treasure hunt, and that was all afternoon as well, taking them in and out of the classrooms as well. Day 4, working with families and adults. That was the morning, training them all on that. So if somebody's rude to you, I had a whole PowerPoint on different types of parents, why different parents could be rude to you or not be rude to you. If you want to see that PowerPoint, I don't mind sharing it. It's something that I created at the work, but it definitely takes you through like why people are rude and things that you can handle. And then also I have very specific, very individual, very subjective ideas about parents that I want my staff to know. I like to be very hands-on. So a lot of people might be more hands-off. They allow their staff with parents. But if a parent's mad, my feeling was like, I always want to know as soon as it happens. So it's not coming back to bite me like at 5:30 in the morning when I walk back in those doors, you know, something like that. So allowing them to know what my feelings about parents were, and then also just kind of training them on working with families, talking with families, greeting parents, the importance of greeting them, that type of stuff. And then in the afternoon, once again, the classroom of their own. So going into the classroom once more to get some more hands-on experience with a mentor teacher in that classroom to learn more. Typically, this works with classrooms as well, especially in early childhood education, that when you're typically first hired, you're typically an afternoon teacher. You're not that opener. We kind of, I don't know why we kind of have it like that, but most people start as afternoon people or full-time people. So they're getting to know the kids that they're going to have the most time with, and typically their shift as well. Day 5 is just any loose ends, and I talk a lot about ethics and leadership, so conduct, how you professional development and professional behavior. What do I expect of you in the classroom? You're an early childhood education professional, and I expect certain things of you. And then once again, winding up the day with classroom on their own, and then they also engage in lesson planning that day with the team that they might be starting to join as well. So at nap time or whenever during that week that they did lesson planning, they joined in with that as well in order to help prepare for the next one. So this is just an example. This is what I used to do when I worked on Camp Pendleton. Not everybody I know has the luxury of 40 hours of onboarding, but it's to give you an example, maybe things that you could take, like the treasure hunt, or having other staff supporting you. My whole day, all my 40 hours that week were not devoted to the staff. Probably 20 to 25 was, so about half my week was devoted to these onboarding these new people, but I also had other people support me as well. So that's onboarding. You don't have to do it my way, and you might want to look up different ways, absolutely, what's going to work best for you. But I do think orienting staff, because they need to be able to do skills and they need to do the skills that you want, is really, really important, and it can make sure that you're not hitting problems down the line. Like, well, I never knew that. Nobody ever taught me that. Or you told me once, but I totally forgot because I heard 50 things that week. So making sure that you're hitting the really important things over and over again to make sure that those skills are really reinforced. Now we're going to jump to training. And this is what our online assignment is going to be, but it's just the idea that you might need to tell people new things. You might need to work with new staff, and then you might also need to tell all of your staff something, or maybe more experienced staff something. Not just writing the memo and expecting that they read it and do it, but actually ensuring compliance, actually teaching them a knowledge and a skill, having it be active and hands-on so that it's much easier for them to go into the classroom and understand what we want, and then also make it easier for them to do it in the classroom. So sometimes you all know there's 90,000 regulations and requirements, especially if you're working in early childhood education. You know, community care licensing or whatever licensing board you're working for has really significant licenses, and they have really significant requirements. So sometimes we have to train staff, and I'm talking about new staff. So maybe not onboarding, but they're new to your program, or they're in that first kind of novice stage of teacher development, and so they're just a little overwhelmed. They're in the weeds, they can't look up, every day is a kind of a new thing, a new struggle, a new piece to work on. But you also need to make sure that they are keeping the important things in their mind as they're starting to work. Or this could also be onboarding. So if you want people to know that correct ratios is important, this is a way that you could do it. I think first, and on the left-hand side, the first thing is that you clearly communicate expectations before and during the training, and that's why you've already written the policy. So this isn't on the fly. Hey guys, this is brand new and I've never even thought about it, but me putting no effort into it absolutely will make sure that a new training will go fine. That's never worked ever. I can't do that. I don't just walk into lectures without any preparation. Yeah, it might be okay because I've got 20 years of experience, but at the same time, I'm not going to have the copies that I need. I don't have PowerPoints to show you guys. It would just be me talking for a while and then, oh, talk about this in your groups maybe. We put a lot of effort into how we teach at community colleges because we want you to walk away with a lot of information. So we do a lot of prep time. I would expect the same thing as a supervisor. You can't just walk in and not have a policy or not have expectations or not have an idea of what you want to train people. There's a lot that goes into it. So we're going to have a policy or procedure or whatever. You're communicating your expectations. You are going to maintain correct ratios. Then you're going to assess that teachers understand this. Well, what does it mean? What is your correct ratio? You're in the infant classroom. How many babies can you watch? Then we're going to check that the expectations are being implemented within the classroom practice, so the training's over, and now you're going to make sure that they're doing it. And then you might have to retrain some people. I wouldn't get mad at those people unless it's a consistent thing and they're willfully being like, well, I don't want to do this, this is dumb. Then maybe you need to have a conversation with them and reassess their employment with you. But sometimes people just don't understand. And if it's a harder thing, like working with parents that involves so many skills, so many variables, so many different types of parents and personalities, you might have to work with them and take it case by case as well. And then you also have to remind staff. I mean, typically, as an early childhood education professional, we all know about family style dining. Does that mean that I could walk into 50 centers and they would all be doing family style dining? No. If I asked each individual, if there's 50 centers, there's 500 staff members. And if I was to ask all of them, they could probably tell me what family style dining is. But let's say there was only 25 that were not doing it. Those 25 knew what it was. They just weren't doing it for a variety of reasons. So part of supervision is making sure that you're going back and you're reminding people gently or retraining them on what they actually should be doing to remind them, because there's, once again, a lot of skills in classrooms. So here's an example of what it would look like. So let's say correct ratios are maintained, and this is very different depending on the classroom that you're in. But it's a new expectation for all staff members. But let's say I'm training a new staff member on this. So I would have the staff sign the job description and the employee handbook stating what ratios are and the procedures for maintaining ratios and supervisions. So maybe I have a procedure for in the classroom and I have a procedure for on the playground, very different environments. What would be my expectations in both places? In the training, I would take them to the classrooms. So they would be in the classroom and they would see what 12 little bodies of humans looks like running around. We would talk about bathrooms. We would talk about closets. We would talk about the playground, places you should stand, places you shouldn't stand, what's clumping, what's too much talking. And then I have videos as well. I think it's a good idea to see, especially if you're walking from your classroom and you're having to walk to a separate playground. It's not attached to your classroom. So what does that actually look like? How do you make sure that you leave with 5 toddlers and you come back with 5 toddlers? And then I would also make sure that they get some time in the classroom observing really good teachers who are known to have great supervision as well. Then in the first months of probation, I would reassess that this person understands ratios. Because once again, there's a lot of skill in making sure that 12 kids are running around being safely supervised for 9 hours a day. That's a really hard thing to do. So checking in to make sure that she understands ratios, where maybe some deficits in her skill building in areas where she might need a little bit more support from me and talking through me and maybe seeing the mentor teacher provide correct supervision as well. And then in my daily rounds of classroom checks, I'm making sure that our ratios are maintained. That's just part of my job. That would be second nature. I would know to do this. I might also need to pull her out of the classroom again and re-show her the videos and talk with her about playgrounds, because playgrounds are typically our areas where we're really struggling with supervision, so I could do that as well. Then I would remind all staff at the monthly staff meeting as well. So I might build up an agenda and we might talk about this and we might build it into our lesson plan, something like that, in order to support this new staff member. And it's something that staff typically needs to be retrained on if they're getting a little bit lax on supervising children. So what if it's new for everybody? So it's a new policy and it's a new procedure. Maybe you're changing professional development. Maybe you're trying to put new curriculum into place, something like that. There should be demonstration, there should be practice, and there should be hands-on learning as well. It cannot just be the policy. Once again, a policy is great. It should be well written, and it's allowing you, by writing down your ideas and thoughts, to be able to articulate that by speaking to other people really, really clearly. But it has to be about your connection and your relationships with your staff. So it has to be about practice, about demonstration, about hands-on learning. It cannot just be static. Otherwise, people are going to struggle to implement it. So let's say hand washing after diapering is a new policy. I really hope not. I hope that if all the people that I'm talking to, you guys are washing your hands after you do diapering, but let's say you weren't doing it for some reason, yuck, and licensing showed up and you got hit, and now new policy, we're all gonna wash our hands after we diaper toddlers. Okay, So the procedure is explained and it's shown as well. So I'm going to show you on a doll. I'm going to diaper change a baby. I'm going to show you how to dispose of a diaper, and then I'm going to literally show you how to wash your hands. I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to do all of the things. I'm going to sing happy birthday to you. Whatever it is, song that you should sing, whatever it is to reinforce how long they should be washing their hands, that I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to have and allow time for staff to discuss this and bring up any concerns. I have to wash my hands after every baby. There are 16 babies in this room. Do you know how much time that's going to take? And then as a supervisor, I do. It's a change in our policy, but you know what? It's really, really important. Science shows us that when we wash our hands, we're decreasing diarrhea by 40%. Do you like to get sick and be off work and not have money? No, then you need to be washing your hands so that you're not getting sick. You're not bringing it home to your own kids at home, you know, kind of reinforcing what's their buy-in. Why should they be washing their hands? They should be washing their hands. But if this was new, what is their buy-in? Why should they be doing this? Then I would have everybody break up. They would practice with the baby doll. So they would literally practice diaper changing, and they would literally go to classrooms and practice washing their hands to be reminded. I would also, at this point, be having pictures explaining how to wash your hands posted at every sink. Once again, this should all be something that we have. And even in employee bathrooms, it would be examples. And by examples, I mean literally what I expect. So I expect that you wash your hands. I expect that you put 2 pumps of soap on. I expect that you spend at least 30 seconds scrubbing your hands, and then you rinse it off correctly with warm water. Whatever it is, I'm also really, really articulating how to do it as well. Then all staff sign this new procedure, hopefully not new, that they understand and that they're going to implement it. And then for a couple weeks after, I observe to make sure that it's happening in classroom. So I know that maybe when the toddlers all wake up at 2:30, they're always should be getting their diapers changed as they're waking up from nap. So you're going to be in the toddler classroom at 2:30, making sure that all of their hands are being washed appropriately. All right, so ways to conduct an effective training session. The first word is it's active, not just sitting there, not just watching a PowerPoint. That's the problem with online learning, is that a lot of time it's very, very static. So that's why you have these weekly assignments where you're actually having to reflect on, think on, or write something. I wish that we were face-to-face so that we could be a bit more active, and that would just be a wish of mine. None of my classes I teach typically for 3 hours. I typically try not to lecture any more than 30 minutes. Typically no more than 15 minutes. Then we do an activity, then I do 15 minutes, then we do an activity, then I do 15 minutes, then we do an activity. I don't want to hear hear myself talk. And it doesn't reinforce your learning. By doing, by trying, by seeing, by hearing, by writing, by talking with other coworkers, you are learning and it's getting into your brain. It also needs to be structured, and prepared. Once again, I spend a lot of time prepping these types of lectures and this work for you so that I'm not just sitting here being like, and then trainings like this, and then I do that, and then I wonder, I know what's going on. So typically you only have an hour for a staff meeting. Sometimes you have a workshop or a morning and you've got a bit more time. But typically you have an hour, hour and a half for a staff meeting. So it needs to be structured. You might have 5 really important things. I would probably narrow it down to 3, but you have 3, you have 55 minutes because people are always a little bit late and you want to get them out the door at 7 because it's Friday night and everybody wants to get home or whatever it is. So how much time can you allot to something, and then how much time for being active? So it is structured and that you know what's going to happen. There's an agenda, and that's the practice we're going to be doing for the online assignment this week as well. You also need to be well prepared. You've made enough copies. If you are doing diaper changing, you have enough dolls, you have enough soap. If you're doing bubbles, you have enough bubbles. Whatever it is, you're well prepared as well. So it goes smooth, it goes seamlessly, and staff feel like you've spent some time in the idea of helping them gain knowledge. Also, we've spent a lot of time in this class doing multiple intelligences. So people learn in different ways. Children learn in different ways. This is your highlight. This is the place where you're going to show that you understand multiple intelligences by bringing it into how you teach your staff. Not everybody learns in the same way. So have something doing, have something talking, have something hearing, have something musical. Then universal design for learning. Talked a little bit about that. So kind of centering people who might be struggling with understanding. So in this area, a lot of times I would always center people who were learning English. So my staff members who are maybe bilingual as well. So I would always make sure that they felt supported in understanding this knowledge, especially if English was their second language as well. If I needed to translate it, but typically I would have people sat in certain spots so that I knew that if somebody needed a little bit help with maybe vocabulary or procedures or things like that, there would be somebody next to them who could support them in understanding that, or I would come back through after I talked about it and make sure that that person understands the things that I was saying. And then cultural competence as well. In cultures, we start to understand, and our beliefs and our attitudes are very, very different, and being culturally competent when you are conducting training is really important as well. All right, so I don't know why this keeps going ahead. There is an online assignment. It's a template that I have online that I'm going to show you. You're going to use that template. You're not going to create your own. You're going to use the one that I provided for you. You're going to download it. You're going to save it. You're going to write your own work in, and then you're going to re-upload it to Canvas. So right now, what I'm going to do is I am going to share this. I'm going to share the screen with Canvas for you guys. So I'm going to go to Canvas. There we go. All right, so here we are in week 9, training and orientation. Here is the training plan agenda. So this is your weekly assignment. It's worth 20 points. I made it more because I think it's really important. I think it's very, very important that you've actually thought about how you're going to train. Like I said, it's going to use some course content from previous classrooms. So you're going to need to know about multiple intelligences, about cultural competence, about universal design for learning in order to make a really active and engaging staff workshop or staff training. So this is the actual assignment that you're going to be doing. I'm going to show you in Word what the assignment looks like so that you feel supported in understanding this. All right, so here it is. It's called Agenda. So what you're going to do is you're going to download this. It's the agenda for a staff workshop. So you can leave this part, you can leave that here. You can add your school name. If you have a school name, then you could write the place where you're actually working, or you could just make up one. It's totally up to you. Don't worry about the date or time. Right here, you're going to write what the topic is. So in this case, mine would be bubbles. So it's important to me that I wanted to pick something fun because not everything is always super boring. So I wanted to pick something that I want to train. All right, there we go. Okay, so I wanted to train staff in bubbles. So right here under topics, I would write bubbles. It's not always boring. It's not always hand washing. It's not always family style dining. Sometimes it can be the fun things that we want to see programs do. A lot of times staff forget about having fun in the classroom, and that's how we engage children is through play and fun. So bubbles, so my learning outcomes. So right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out what I want my staff to understand by the end of the workshop or training. So in this workshop, staff is going to understand how to make Bubbles solution, when to incorporate into classrooms, and how Bubbles support learning. So those are my 3 learning outcomes: how to do it, when to do it, and why it's important. Any materials. So I'm going to probably need a lot of materials. So right there, I'm going to write what the materials are. So I have bubble wands, I have super long string to make those giant bubbles, I have a baby pool to put, to make those big bubbles in, I have the like cornstarch. I can't remember all of the things that you can put into bubbles to make the giant bubbles. So I have a lot of things. So for me, this is going to be a reminder to, write myself a note. So I need a lot of bubble solution. I need the baby pool. I need the rope. I need lots of different fly swatters that can make bubbles. I need a lot of things for this workshop. So this is going to help me remember to actually bring that on that Friday that I'm doing the training. Then read. So typically I would have the staff read a page or 2 before they enter something, or in this case, I might send everybody an email, a video of people doing bubbles in the classrooms. So get their interest. Oh, it's super interesting. This video is so cool. I would love to do this. Look, they're doing bubbles in the divided play area. They're doing bubbles outside. They're doing bubbles at circle time. That's so cool. Or maybe it could be a reading. Bubbles are important. Bubbles teach children science because bubbles are STEM, because, something like that. So something to get their interest and maybe reinforce their knowledge. So typically something to read, watch, see, something just to get them thinking before they enter. And I would typically email it out, or I would make copies and give it to them, maybe a week or a couple days before. Bring, and this is for staff. So do you want your staff to bring anything? So do they need to bring their most current observations? Do they need to bring lesson plans? Do they need to bring their DRDPs? Do they need to BYOD, which is bring your own device? So if they have a classroom iPad or a Chromebook, do they need to bring that as well? What is it that you want them to bring? It doesn't have to be anything, but if they want them to bring materials or things from their classroom, this is the place to have that agenda so that you can send them an email to remind everybody about what they're going to do. Then time as well. So please give me a time. And I want you to have it structured every 15 minutes. So we know about 10 or 15 minutes is basically people's utmost attention span. So once again, when I was talking about lecturing for 3 hours, I lecture for like 10, 15 minutes, then we do something to reinforce it. 10, 15 minutes, and I reinforce it. If I'm lecturing for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I have a video halfway through that tells or shows people how to take care of children. So every 15 minutes, consider structuring something, knowing that that is how you keep people's attention. All right, so in this, you're going to provide knowledge about how they're going to learn and what you want them to learn. So in this case, you'll say, I want staff, once again, to know how to make bubbles. I want staff to see where they can do bubbles in the classroom, and I want staff to know why bubbles can help with learning. So I'm going to have a PowerPoint, so maybe it's going to show. So it's going to say, bubbles are STEM because bubbles are engineering, bubbles are science, bubbles are technology, showing people how, the idea of suspension, the idea of liquids, the ideas of gravity are important. We're teaching children this in this way. We're going to tell parents, today your child learned about science and technology by blowing bubbles. Bubbles are, suspension of liquid. Bubbles are understanding of gravity, that type of thing. And then I'm also going to show a video, and in my video, it's going to show all of the crazy ways that you can use bubbles in the classroom. You can make giant bubbles outside. You can blow bubbles in your lesson plan to support different types of books. You can have it in your sensory area. You can have it in your pretend play area, something like that. Then in this area as well, you're going to write the top 3 pieces of knowledge or skills you want your staff to understand. So bubbles support learning in 3 ways. Bubbles are science because, whatever it is. So this is how you're going to tell me how knowledge is going to happen. Are you going to do a PowerPoint? Are you going to do a Prezi? Are you going to have a guest speaker? Are you going to play videos? Are you just going to lecture with a handout? It's totally up to you, but how are you going to get your knowledge across so they can start skill building? And what are the things that you want staff to understand? Then you're going to write down in this section as well, right here, you're going to include at least 2 active activities for staff to engage in to support their learning. So for example, you could break out into groups in order to play with bubbles in different areas. So maybe I have it outside making giant bubbles. Maybe I have it inside. One of my mentor teachers is showing a bubble book, and that all of the kids get little bubbles and they get to blow bubbles at certain points during the book. Maybe I'm showing you in this cool new recipes in your sensory area. Something like that about bubbles. And then at the very end, they're getting time to write a lesson plan. So next week, how are you going to bring bubbles into your classroom? And then at the end, I always leave time for questions and concerns, and then conclusion. Thank you so much for coming. You don't need to write about this, but there are things that you might want to plan for as well. So thank you so much for coming. What are the takeaways? What do you want them to remember? What do you want them to take away and enter into their classroom? And then there's always concerns and questions. Sometimes it's not in that moment. Sometimes it's afterwards as well. But just know that, you know, understanding things about bubbles and science and technology might take some time, and that's why I built in lesson plans so that they can be supported in how they're going to use this knowledge and skill in their lesson plans. So anywhere that you see red, you are going to fill out on your own. So what are your learning outcomes? What do you want people to learn out of this staff workshop? What materials do you need to bring, buy, order, have available on that day to support learning? What do you want them to read, watch? How do you want to get their interest, their curiosity up before they even enter into the lesson? And then what do you want staff to bring? It can be nothing, but if you want them to bring a device or papers or baby dolls or whatever it is, what do you want your staff to bring? And then every 15 minutes, how are you going to reinforce knowledge in this first part? How are you going to have them understand it? And then how are you actively going to engage them? What are the actual, you don't need to write an entire long, I don't need a dissertation on the active activities, but give me enough information so that I would understand how you are going to support hand washing, how you're going to introduce them to a new curriculum for the first time, how you're going to explain Brightwheel, which is an app that's for parents. You're the first year you're using it and you want staff to understand it. You can pick any topic in the entire universe of early childhood education. You just need to pick a topic and you need to tell me how you would train staff about it. This needs to be school adjacent. This needs to be about children, about how we work and educate children as well. All right, so that is that. I am going to go back to this, which is my PowerPoint. Let me go back. All right. So after the training, so you've wrote the workshop, you have the best training on the food program that has ever been done in the history of the world. They all understand how we provide food to children in the infant classroom, or whatever it is, whatever topic you've picked. They've now listened to it. You were so engaging, you were awesome, you were so prepared, you had all the materials, you got their interest ahead of time, they put it into active learning, they understand it. Now you need to check for understanding. So you need to be in the classroom, and a lot of times the questions and concerns, sometimes people will ask you in the moment in the training and the workshop, but there's always people who are gonna ask you later on. So being in the classroom a couple days afterwards will allow them to be like, oh, hey, you remember you said about the USDA and like a quarter cup or half cup, you know, I'm confused about that. Could you go over it? And then you can bring out the binder. This is our food program. This is how we have food for children in the classroom. This is the difference between a quarter cup and a half cup. This is when we use a quarter cup. This is when we use a half cup. This is when it's a fruit. This is when it's a vegetable. Because the food program, if you've ever worked in a center, is a little bit confusing. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of understanding. So just making sure that they feel comfortable with what you told them. Sometimes if it's a big topic, like if you're doing diversity work, you're working towards anti-bias, a lot of times in the moment, in the training, they seem to be on board. But then afterwards, they'll ask you questions. Well, what does white privilege mean? So what does anti-bias goal number 4 mean? I'm confused about that. So in this example, you're going back in this classroom and they might feel more comfortable in their classroom, in their turf, or in your office, or not with other people present asking you those questions that might be difficult in the moment. Or they don't want to seem silly. They might think that you might correct them, or they don't want to feel dumb, so they'll ask you later on. And that's totally fine. We want to support staff. then you need to make sure that they're actually doing it. So if Bubbles was just something fun, you wanted to remind them about science and technology in the classroom and how important teaching children was, but it was more about the fun and thinking outside of the box, then you might want to look for compliance with that. So are lesson plans improving? Are they looking for new loose parts? Are they trying to bring in something cool that they saw on Pinterest? You know, something like that. Or was the compliance literally diaper changing? And you need to make sure that you are watching literally diaper changing to make sure that it is correct. Or how do you make bleach, or clocking in, whatever it was, you need to make sure that the compliance is happening. And both for understanding and compliance, that's FaceTime with you in the classroom, doing informal or formal observations. Once again, it's not always on you. If you have other people who are management or mentors, they might be able to support you as well. Volunteers as well. So depending on who your volunteers are, there might be some additional training as well. So they're student teachers typically. There might be volunteers in your classroom or out on your playgrounds. It's up to your program, and it's very individual as well. To be in the classroom, they typically need their TB, their immunizations, plus a background check. Like that's not like that, you don't get to decide that, that's just what happens. But also I have them sign relevant documents and be trained for a room or an area that they're going to volunteer in. And typically it was, you are not part of supervision. you might be supportive, you might be reading a book, but the teacher can never, ever, ever, ever leave you alone in the classroom or on the playground with the children. Even if they have to go to the bathroom real bad, or their husband just called them on the phone or anything like that, you don't ever get to leave them alone. So that's typically what it was. And I might train them for an area as well. So I had great gardeners. We had a garden plot. It was fairly large for our school age program. And we were really lucky that we had a guy that would come in every other week for about 2 hours. And he would either teach the kids about gardening, because he was like a master gardener volunteer, or he would just kind of weed if the kids weren't there. Like if they were at school that day and that was his 2 hours, then he would just come in and weed. And we actually kept vegetables alive because of this guy. So thankful for him. And he was awesome. So he was, you know, an older adult, senior citizen, retired guy. He's fantastic. So he had TB and immunization record in addition to emergency contact form in his file. So he had his own little volunteer file. It was a totally different color. We had his wife's number. We knew that he had a bum hip, all this type of stuff. So if he did take a fall, I had some paperwork signed about liability as well. And then also I knew like to call his wife and get his TRICARE, get him to the Naval Hospital, that type of stuff. He also was screened by LiveScan before volunteering as well, really important, and not like, that's just something you have to do. So he also, the gardener, he also signed forms indicating he understood my center policies on unsupervised children. He could never be left alone with children, and what would to be happen if he was, he needed to let me know right away. I also told him about child abuse, what our policy was about child abuse, signs and symptoms. What if a child talked to him about things that kind of raised flags or put a doubt in your mind? Please let me know as soon as you are concerned. I want to know about these type things. I let him know the basics of developmentally appropriate care. I already knew he has like 5 kids and like legit like 20 grandkids. He was fantastic with kids, but just what's developmentally appropriate practice. So if the 2-year-olds come, you know, they're going to be a little bit more wild than the 7-year-olds in our school age program. So what's the difference? You have to be kind with them. You have to use nice words. I didn't have to worry about it with this guy, maybe with different gardeners, kind of saying, what are your expectations? This is how we talk to children. And then any other relevant information. So he was basically outside. Sometimes he was with kids, sometimes he wasn't. He was never left alone. My staff knew to really support him. He's not a teacher, you know, he's giving us his expertise on vegetable growing that literally none of us had. And this garden would have been a total flop without him. You know, let's really support him in doing this great volunteer work that he's doing for us. But if they were, you know, a retired behaviorist who's helping out with challenging behaviors, you know, they have a lot of information, but I also want to make sure that they know what I expect within my programs as well. Lab schools are going to have different requirements as well, typically TB and immunizations, but if you're kind of working at a lab school, interning at a lab school, doing practicum at a lab school, that's going to be different as well. Or if you run one, I just wanted to really talk about maybe what you might want to do with volunteers as well, if you're lucky enough to have volunteers. And so in conclusion as well, check for understanding, check for compliance, I'm sorry, that's my conclude. There we go. How we train staff makes a really big difference in the classroom. So the more that we can not just give them a memo, not just give them a policy, not just give them a piece of paper, but tell them, show them, help them do what the paper and policy says, the better off the program is going to be, because they might actually then do it. A memo doesn't change anybody's behavior. I can sign a memo or look at a memo or rip a memo up, throw it in the trash can, and never ever change what I'm actually doing. But if I've been shown, if I've been supported, if I've been told, if I've been explained, if I've been just understood to, and I've been given time and space to understand this, then I might actually kind of be able to build that skill in the classroom. Because it is a skill-based profession. A lot of it is knowledge and understanding, but a lot of it is skill as well. And when we support staff in skill knowledge and building our skill knowledge and skill building, our educational output is better as well. All right, thank you so much. I will see you guys online.